Hey guys, welcome back. Still wiring, you probably guessed that. But yeah, here we go. I'm working on the outer low beam headlight, and strangely enough, the high beams come through that headlight to remain powered, even though it's not a high beam technically, but when high beams are on, all four headlights are lit. So that's the reason for that. And what do you know? Another spam call. They look very, very similar. It's easy to screw that one up. Finally got my AC hose fittings that I wanted, or that I needed. That since Vintage Air started putting one end of the hoses together for us, at first I thought, hey, that's convenient. Next I realized that they didn't clock it correctly, so it's kind of a bummer. As if that kit wasn't expensive enough to go buy more fittings, so that's not ideal, but that's the way it is. Yeah, so it'll be headlight, low beam. Yeah, so there won't be any low beam wire on the interior headlight, basically the high beam. So in other words, they're not jumped out to feed one side. That would be the only other reason you would do that. You, like I did on this high beam here, it basically just gets a ground and a high beam wire. So okay, ground will be here. I'm not going to run the ground over the core support. I'm just putting it out of the way. It's going to be attached to one of these fit fasteners here. So, so next, I just have to wire the internal headlight on the passenger side now, and we'll be done with the front end. Well, actually no, I have to do marker lights and turn signals, but I have to put the valance on for the turn signals. So I will jump out for the marker lights, which I already have wired up here. Are you guys getting bored yet? This might bore you, you know, but not everything building a car is I guess riveting. But hopefully some of this helps you if you're building a car or fixing one of your cars. Hopefully this is providing value for that. Those are getting grounds. Wait a minute, that is jumping out. So yeah, this is a simple one, just terminating on these guys. big single wire. Good. Okay, now I'll wire the marker lights. I've already hung the market lights in the opening, but this is the way the wiring turned out here. You can see in there. I'm gonna wrap it still. I didn't plug these guys in all the way. Just kind of on the end of the prongs there. Once you put them on, they tend to stay very tight. So you can see the other side over there, how it's jumped out. And and then I've got my right turn is the blue, or the blue, and then the brown is the running lights for park lights. And same thing over here. Got a ground jumped out here, but I think what that needs to be is, instead of that ground, it should be park lights. So I screwed that up somehow, but yeah, let me fix that. Yeah, so I just remembered where I left off yesterday. I lost my depinning tool, and that just made me mad yesterday, and I just didn't do anything about it. So here I am again, using a different tool, which is just a control screwdriver. This is what most of you will have on hand to do this, and luckily you can. But I actually bought that depinning tool for the Holley, the last Terminator system I did. I wanted to unpin a bunch of wires that I wasn't going to use, just to clean things up. And it's been a saving grace ever since, but now I can show that I don't need it. Jumping this, so I got to jump a ground out of the high beam here. So what I do is I just put two fingers on the wire and hold the connector with my other two fingers, and then just push that barb fitting up, and it just backs itself out. There we go. Okay. Now, I always get nervous when I have a single wire connector on a wire, because they jump out. You jump out so many things on these systems. I always feel a little uneasy about it. So just check your wiring diagram. Don't be like me. Go too fast. Big. Ground wire. So yeah, the ground wire I'm jumping out of the high beam is for the side marker lights in the front. And that just reminds me, I have to do that in the back as well. Shoot. I forgot. So today's the day to install the fan and clutch and fan shroud. It's been sitting on the bench for a while now, and I'm tired of moving it, so it's going on the car. But I gotta pull the radiator out first. If I don't break this, I don't want to break that fitting off. Sometimes you just gotta slit the end just to get it to release and then cut it back before you forget, and then you won't have a leak. But first, I'll have to put tape on that just so it doesn't fray. Yeah, I spent a lot of money on this, on restoring this radiator. So just taking it out is just an easier thing to do than it'll just get beat up while I'm wrenching on the water pump pulley and whatnot. So I'm going to try to avoid that in all my hard work, or someone's hard work, not mine. That's also why I use the masking tape on the mating finishes of the radiator, just because I knew I was going to have to pull it out at least once. It wouldn't be a car build unless you had to pull the radiator out once at least. Luckily, Dodge provides these slotted holes on the bottom of these radiators, so you can just leave those bottom bolts loose, and then the top ones go into a hole that captures the whole thing. Pretty cool. I've never known a manufacturer to do that, which is pretty impressive. So we can do this without scratching anything. This radiator is a tight fit. Easy does it. Alright guys, I'm back on the accessory drive right this second, and I wanted to kind of point out some struggles I've had. Ordered what I thought was the correct stud and nut kit from Classic Industries to attach a mechanical fan with the clutch on it to the water pump. The water pump is a later water pump, and those have 18 pitch threads. It's 5/16 by 18 pitch, and of course they were too short anyway, so back in the bag they went to the return box, and I just hit my local hardware store for some. They're basically set screws, but they're 2-inch. Of course they're too long, but here's my situation here. So the spacer I had was way too long. I had that on hand for some reason, and I spent a couple hours making this thing. Basically it's 5/8 of an inch wide, just to get my fan is about, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch off the radiator there, as close as possible, but don't want it too close. But you can see the studs, how they're poking through the back there. So I've got them marked and I'm going to cut them. But the trick is you want to put a nut on those things before you cut them, so when you spin the nut off, it basically rights the threads, and then you can put like a nice bevel on the ends of them. So yeah, that's where I'm at, and looks like see how long they are. The fan won't even drop down past the snout of the water pump until I get these things to where they'll thread back this way. Yeah, so it's all these things are they're just time consumers basically, in the midst of wiring and whatnot. So I did get my master cylinder last night. I'm going to work on putting that in today, and then I can finally wrap up the brakes. I got brake lines from Wilwood also. That the thing with the Wilwood calipers is they have a funky 1/8 inch, I think it's 1/8 20, or no, 1/8 24 pitch stud or fitting on the caliper, and I bought some Goodson ones from Classic Industries, and I could not find an adapter from 3/16 inverted flare to the 1/8 24 pitch caliber. So it doesn't exist, which is crazy to me. So I ended up buying a set of brake lines from Wilwood that are basically just -3. So this is what I ended up with. And so as you can see, it's got a hose end on either end, so that's -3. And then these bigger fittings here are what I was missing on the other one. Other brake lines had these at both ends, and you can't adapt, which I believe is a 3/16 inverted flare. You can't adapt that to the 1/8" fitting on the caliper, so they did me no good. I actually tried cutting them and putting an end on the other ones and just failed altogether. So these guys, while I don't need 90 degree, I bought some other adapters that adapt -3 to 3/16 inverted flare, so I'm good to go there. And then of course my fuel line came with the wrong fuel inlet fittings. So these are the 9/16 to -6. I'm gonna run -6 and see what happens. It may not be enough. And then of course with the Wilwood brake or master cylinder, and I'm using drums on the back there, and so I have to use a residual pressure valve because the master cylinder is for disc, and this will basically work for the rear drums. So yeah, yay for me. Yeah, so all my stuff, and I got mufflers, so I have a muffler mocked up underneath there. Lots going on. So let me get these studs out and I'll be right back. All right, I got the fan clutch on with the spacer, and I wanted to show you guys something. For those of you who know what a coilover shock is, or have had any sort of side-by-side in the last 10 years, you most likely have this tool in your arsenal. So it's a freewheeling clutch, obviously, when it's not at temperature. So the water pump will just spin. In order to tighten these bolts, these guys here, you can see that, I'm pointing it with the wrench, you really can't hold it. There's no way to keep it from spinning. So what I do is take this guy and go around that spacer, and I can actually hold this spacer from turning and tighten the bolts, or I'm sorry, the nuts and the studs that I put in there. And of course I bought 2-inch studs, and I really needed 1 3/4, so I had to shorten them. Why is this stuff always so time consuming? It's like I wanted to run a mechanical fan just for the redundancy of it, and you know, what could possibly go wrong with a mechanical fan, right? Well, fitting it, that's what goes wrong. It's just a hassle. So, and don't forget to put your fan shroud on before you put the fan on, and then it'll sit like that, hopefully, with any luck, up and out of the way of the radiator. And of course you want to drop your fan on the ground a couple times too, otherwise it won't work. So yeah, that's ready for a radiator. I do have to shorten these bolts. I noticed these factory radiator bolts here are actually contacting the condenser. I'll show you. You can see right here, it comes through this little guy right here, and it contacts the outer tube of the condenser, and that will poke a hole. So luckily this is pretty thick tubing, but it's actually something to be wary of, so keep an eye out for that. Alright, so I just shortened this hardware here for the radiator just to mitigate that issue with hitting the condenser. It's time to drop this radiator back in. Let's hope I don't have to take this thing out again because the fan shroud needs to be trimmed or something. That would suck. But I fully expect it. Awesome. No shroud trimming. That's amazing. And I've got exactly a fingertip's worth of room between the fan and the radiator fins. So that is a win.